Today on this episode, we have Amy Larson, the current SVP of Sales and Marketing at RX Green Technologies, and formerly, marketing and communications leader at Tilt Holdings, where she guided hundreds of brands across the United States. She's seen every aspect of our industry, from the boardroom to the cultivation, and actually a lot of advocacy, which we're going to get into. She is a groundbreaking leader in our space, and I am so stoked she's here. Amy, thank you again for jumping on this morning. I want to dive into probably the most salient topic of the week, year, month, which is, from your vantage point, when we see the market compressing, erosion of margin, either, where you've had so much experience at the brand level or at, RX Green, what was it like at Tilt to see it compressing, and what's it like now in this new role that you have?
Yeah. It's, when I was at Tilt, it was interesting to watch it compress because we were, we had dispensaries and brands in Massachusetts, right? Massachusetts has saw some of the most rapid price compression at that time back in, 2022, 2023. I think as much as it kind of sucks to hear it, it's a right sizing of the market, right? I think there were a lot of growers, there were a lot of brands, there were a lot of companies, whether they were, MSOs or not, that were, looking to capitalize the most on, the green rush while it was happening. And the problem was, I don't think a lot of people really put truly thoughtful operational business plans in place. And I think a lot of people forgot about high school economics, the law of supply and demand. What happens with supply and demand? As supply increases, then price drops. As demand increases, price goes up. So as we're flooding the market with all of these products and all of this flower, I think there were two things happening. I think one, we had not created enough consumer demand. And two, there was just an oversupply. So that's a natural correction of the market, not just on the Tilt side, on the cultivation side. We also are seeing it on, now being on the ancillary side at RX Green. There was a thinking at one time that, going from being vertical and brands and all of the things and plant touching to being back on the ancillary side would be a little bit easier. And it's really not, because our customers and our partners are also, subject to the margin compression. Everybody's looking to create operational efficiency. Everybody's looking to try to get more out of their dollar, more out of their teams. And that's what I think that we're seeing compress in the market. And I think it's affecting people's jobs. It's affecting people's brands. It's affecting people's, success. And I think there's a lot of things that are out of everyone's control at this point. 280E, descheduling, rescheduling, all of those things that we've kind of been waiting on, not getting a lot of traction on. But I think I think a significant chunk of the compression that we're seeing is really a right sizing of the market. And I think it's something that all industries go through. We're just doing it under a microscope, and it's happening extremely, extremely fast. And it's painful. I don't want to diminish that. It is painful.
Yeah, it's definitely painful. I think, from a cultivation side, which I know you've had so much experience in, it's absolutely brutal. It's like the scene in The Patriot where, they're running down the hill and everyone's getting sniped next to Mel Gibson. You're just going like, oh shit, another cultivation went under. Another guy fell. And then you're just kind of waiting to see if that last bullet's headed for you. From that cultivation side, I think it's very difficult because of the compression in the wholesale model. What is your expectation for the companies that are going to make it? And you can talk about it, because I know you've had so much experience not only on the marketing side, but you've kind of looked at companies and evaluated them. Who do you think is going to come out of this on the dispensary brand cultivation side?
I think it's going to be the businesses that have put together a plan that is based on the current reality of the finances, of the market, of the consumers. Anyone who has gone into this industry with the expectation that 280E is going to go away, with the expectation that rescheduling, descheduling is going to happen, that federal legalization is going to happen, you can't build a successful business or a successful brand on the hopes of tomorrow, really. You have to create a sustainable business model within the constraints of what you're working in today. And I also think from a brand perspective, from a product perspective, you have to have a brand that resonates with people, and it has to be authentic to you and to what you're trying to do, but it also has to resonate with the people that you're trying to sell it to. And that authenticity and that reality needs to kind of be rooted in every layer of your business and your organization. And I think we also have to stop expecting that just price is going to win on everything. And right now it is, but ultimately, once you convince, and this is Greg, you've been in marketing too. This is not a new adage. Like, once you convince a coupon shopper to buy using a coupon, you're never going to get them to pay full price. And if that's your business model, that's fine. But that's not, if you want to set yourself up as a high-end brand or a luxury brand, you can't be discounting it all of the time because you're eroding your own value. That was kind of a roundabout answer to your
No,
question.
it's 100% true. I mean, I had a meeting with an unnamed dispensary earlier this week, and it's like, it's funny. They won't say it publicly, but they will privately acknowledge they know they've nuked the market. They know it.
Yeah.
They know that
Yeah.
they have essentially nuked the market in terms of creating these monsters that don't want to just shop for anything other than what's my deal day, what's my deal day, what's my deal day. And then it becomes very interesting when, and I'm sure you've seen some of this too, where people were over aggressive and buying up all these grows, and now they have excess material at the MSO level. It's like, well, we better push it through at any price, and that's just nuking the market.
Yeah, and the MSO model, when you're vertical, you obviously want to own you own and you push out your own brand, your own product, right? You capture the most margin that way. The problem is consumers don't necessarily want to buy just your brand, and consumers who understand cannabis are now understanding that, oh, this is the same strain in 3 different boxes. Why am I paying, $15 for it here and $20 for it here and $30 for it here? Consumers are savvy to that, and they've understood that. I think the discount model, the drive to the bottom, like, it's just, I honestly think some of it has been, it's happened out of desperation. And I think it's happened out of desperation due to the limits that we've had placed on us from a marketing perspective. How else do you advertise what you can sell? How else do you get in front of customers when you're trying to get in front of consumers with half of the tools in your tool belt that a normal CPG, a normal product would have to work with? And so I think some of that has been out of desperation because we're not able to cross state lines. We're not able to advertise freely. We're not able to do all of these things. And again, you still have to have a solid brand in place to do that. But I think you're right, you've got all of this excess product. Now we've got to, get rid of it. But it's kind of an easy button. Discounting is an easy button to get rid of product. And I think ultimately it's going to kill, it's not going to kill the industry. It's going to really harm the future, profitability of a lot of brands coming into this space.
Yeah, completely agreed. And it's funny that you had a lovely dovetail there into my next question for you. Look, you had a really funny quote, I think when you and I were talking a couple of weeks ago about being in the marketing space in cannabis is basically having both of your hands tied behind your back.
Yes.
What, just as a general level, we'll get into some specifics later, like as a general rule, how do you try and get around all the regulatory bullshit that you and I are subjected to? Where do you look for some strategy and tactics that might actually be effective?
So I will actually back that up just a step, Greg. And what you have to start with is what your goal is. And if your goal is just to drive revenue, it's just to sell products, or is your goal to build brand awareness and build brand visibility? Because those require totally different strategies and then totally different tactics. And they're obviously complementary, but if my goal is to drive product sales, to drive, sell through, I'm going to put tactics in place, like, making sure I've got my loyalty program set up, make sure I've got good in-store signage, making sure I've got, whatever local geo-targeted advertising I can do to get in front of my customers. Can I get involved in community events? How can I reach, how can we explore, honestly, some of the, I don't want to say old school, but I'm old school, Greg. So some of the more traditional tactics that are not just Facebook and Meta and Instagram and TikTok advertising that we know are going to get shut down. How do you actually connect with your customers, and how do you actually get to them? If you're really trying to grow brand visibility and brand awareness, which is what I've been, really trying to work on in tandem with selling products at RX Green for the last, year and change, you've got to start looking at things like thought leadership and conferences and content that you can create, and really building that kind of brand trust and visibility so people at least know who you are, which then makes ultimately that sell a little bit easier when you've got sales guys who are reaching out and talking to people who are like, hey, let me tell you all about who RX Green is. That I'm able to help shorten that conversation when people are like, oh, I know who you are. Oh, I saw you. Oh, I've seen your ads. I've talked, So it depends ultimately on what your goal is. And then, there's some really unique things on the garden side, on the dispensary side. There are ways to get around the filters, but I think ultimately you have to just put your efforts where they're going to support your goals. And one last thing I'll say, because I had, when I was at Tilt, there was, I had a senior leader on my team who kept harping on social media. Why isn't this on social media? Why aren't we putting it on social media? Why isn't it on our Instagram? Blah, blah. And I'm like, because we've had that account shut down so many times. We have a handful of followers, and it's not really driving traffic. It wasn't driving at the time. That channel was not driving traffic back to our website. It was not driving sales. So we chose to put our efforts into the platforms and into the places that actually were driving traffic and driving sales. And I think just because everybody's doing it is not a good enough reason to do it.
Completely agree.
So,
Especially if you're resource strapped, like everybody is.
yeah, everybody's resource strapped.
Yeah. I mean, I still, I still go and do bud tender trainings myself, right? You could argue, is that the best use of my time? I don't know, but I like connecting.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting to me because when I first met you at Tilt, I actually didn't know that you were in tourism before that. And I would love it if you explained how someone
How
makes
I
the
got here.
pivot from tourism to cannabis to land up where you ended up.
So I did. I worked in tourism and restaurants and food and beverage, destination, hospitality, PR, some, lifestyle. I did do some work with, New Belgium and La Marca, Prosecco, but primarily my heart, like I grew my career initially in tourism. And it was in about 2014, right after Colorado had, legalized, the adult use market was opening. A company approached me, and it was My 420 Tours, and they were one of the, if not the first, consumption tour company, and they were looking to how do we get involved with, how do we get in front of travel writers? How do we get involved with convention and visitors bureaus? How do we get involved with people who are bringing tourists, into the space? How do we get the word out about our product? And so it was a really fun kind of entree for me into cannabis to kind of marry up both of these things. And at that time, it was really interesting because back in 2014, 2015, the Colorado Tourism Office wanted nothing to do with cannabis. They wouldn't talk about it. They didn't want to even acknowledge that people might be coming to Colorado for cannabis, for weed, in their words. And it was very much, it was like, okay, guys, like I've been involved in Colorado tourism at this point for, 15, 16 years. If you think people are only coming to Colorado for cannabis, you have not been doing your jobs. But taking that, before I move next, the interesting piece about that is almost every conversation I had with national travel writers, people who wrote for big travel and tourism publications, would look at me like I asked them to kill their child. Oh, I don't want to talk about that. I'm like, I'm not at this point asking you to get high. I'm not asking you to consume. I am sharing this experience with you. And I think that shows a little bit how far we've come, because now, people will talk about it all the time, but 10, 11 years ago, people who were not part of the industry, who didn't understand it, it was still very much taboo to even talk about. But I say that because then for me, it drove a learning experience for me. And that's when I come from, pretty conservative family, not that you know it now, to I'm in cannabis. My youngest sister is an award-winning, ice hash maker. So 50% of my dad's kids are in the industry. But at the time, it drove for me an opportunity to understand cannabis, to start to learn about it. And I actually then I went and worked at a different marketing agency, and I really dove in. And part of my job was to understand how deeply we wanted to play in cannabis. And the more I learned, the more I saw this is a really cool opportunity. This is a really cool plant. There's a lot of need for some professionalism in the industry. Remember, this was back in 2014, 2015. And there's a lot about this plant out there that people don't know and don't understand. And for me, my kind of light bulb moment was actually sitting at a conference in Phoenix in October of 2015. And I saw Ricky Williams and Kyle Turley and someone else speaking on a panel at this conference talking about how their coaches and physical therapists and team physicians were pushing everything on them, from narcotics to pain pills to go out and drink and all this kind of stuff, when really it was cannabis that was helpful to them and helped them heal and help them relax and help them overcome the pain that they were dealing with. And Ricky Williams basically gave up his career in the NFL for cannabis. And fast forward 6 years, I got to meet Ricky Williams when we launched the Heisman brand at Tilt, and I got to tell him that story and how he was really part of my light bulb moment of, we've been lied to. I'm a product of the DARE generation. Nancy Reagan told us to just say no. We said no. Some of us said no. Some of us said no. But now, and that to me was the we've been lied to hit home so strongly for me that in addition with the opportunity, I actually went back to the CEO of the agency I was at and said, we need to invest in this. We need to be part of this. And so we actually I built out the cannabis division of that marketing agency and got to work with some really cool brands. Some of them are still around. Some of them are not. I got to help launch Pop and Barkley. I got to help, work with Seed and Smith. I learned a lot at that time. And then I went to work at a compliant SaaS in 2019. And then I went to Tilt 2 years later. So to your point, Greg, I've seen a lot of different facets of the industry, from ancillary, branding, packaging, marketing, vertical, cultivation. I joke with our team because I have a total brown thumb at home. I am only allowed to take care of one Christmas cactus that I inherited from my grandmother when she passed away 5 or 6 years ago. That's it. My husband doesn't let me touch anything else in our house because I kill the plants. So I'm really, really thankful for farmers and cultivators, and all mad respect to them.
Well, that was a wonderful answer. And I think it also, yet again, dovetails nicely into my next question, which is, you were part of a business at Tilt in the time that you were there. We all know that you've subsequently moved on, where you were in charge or assisted with a number of different marketing campaigns, right?
Yeah.
And God knows that you and I in marketing, we have had a bunch. I'd love to hear, looking back at your time at Tilt, this company that had so many cannabis brands, what were some things that worked well? And what were some things that you were like, shit, that one did not hit?
Well, things that worked well, I think, was really when the brands, and I say the brands because at Tilt, it was this brand partner strategy where it was our role and responsibility to help build the sales and drive the sales. And, obviously we were fulfilling the product side of it, but the ownership of the brand really stayed in the hands of the brand. We supported it, but they owned it. So when I say, what really was successful was the brands who had ambassadors or whose owners, CEOs, founders were in market. We're going to the dispensaries. We're meeting with consumers. We're going to the events. Whether you're a brand or not, there's nothing more important in this industry than networking and knowing people and being seen and being true and being authentic. And that's something that I have kind of preached since the early days. And I think it kind of goes back to the roots of the industry, whereas if you trust John, then I know I can trust John, kind of thing. So we've kind of built this little insular community. But you have to show your passion for the product, for your brand, and you have to really be part of it. You have to be in the community and you have to be representing it and being authentic. What didn't work in a lot of instances was just here's, slapping a name on a package and thinking it was going to succeed. If you don't have the marketing, the brand, the push, the power, the people behind it, it's not going to succeed. And, one campaign, and it actually wasn't even a campaign, Greg, but I'll share this as like a failure. We were juggling, a million different things, and we were trying to get ads out ahead for 420. And I was in the process of transitioning my team, and we were in the process of consolidating SKUs. And as you can't, release your 420 ads too soon because your competitors will then see them and then undercut you. And you can't do it too late because you want to make sure you get to the consumers in time so they make their shopping decisions. So there's this like sweet spot. And I take full ownership of this. And it had gone through me like multiple layers of eyes, but we dropped, we created, the ads to go out, the messages to go out. And rather than saying we dropped them on 419, and it was like late night or late afternoon, 419. So people could make plans for 420. And I think, I don't remember exactly what it was, but I think it said today only, or it said one day only, or like whatever it was not clear. Like it should have said 420 only, like only. And it was just that little tweak of words that then, we had a great 419 that day because we had to honor it. But, I share that because even as many years as we've spent doing this, everybody still makes mistakes. We're all still human.
Oh God. I think that cracks me up. Only in cannabis could it be like, it's not clear if it's 419 or 420.
I know. Right.
Oh man. So, the one that cracked me up, and I think I shared this with you the other day, was we were trying to come up with a really new idea for us that this completely fell on its face.
Uh-huh.
We were going to say, hey, let's do a freshness guarantee. Like, all right, consumers out there, we'll get the product to you guys in a timely manner. And, if it's aged out, it goes into a Colt approved discount goes out the door or whatever. And we were like, this is great. Anytime you see Colt on the shelves, they'll know that it's fresh. And the dispensaries were just staring at us blank eyed, being like, no, that sounds like work. Total failure on my end. They had zero interest, but
I had one other instance that was, it kind of ties back to our earlier conversation about, brand and knowing who your brand is and knowing who your customer. Like back when I was at the marketing agency, we were working this product that was an all natural terpene based cannabis smoke odor specific product that eliminated the smell of cannabis smoke. And it was, their parent company did like industrial odor elimination, odor control, and they rolled out this consumer product, and they had candles and they had spray. Quite frankly, it smelled awesome. It was amazing, but it was very stylized to soccer moms. However, soccer moms were not really the ones smoking joints or smoking a lot of flower. And so we had to kind of split their efforts a little bit, because yes, the soccer moms are they don't want to smell like weed, but also they're also not the ones that are really going to be smoking joints and smell like cannabis smoke. It didn't work on vapes. The vape smell doesn't really stick around. So we had to have this kind of come to Jesus of, okay, this may be who your target consumer is, but this is who's actually going to buy and use this product. And so I share that as you have to understand, make sure you're designing your brand for who your intended consumer is.
Yeah, that's so spot on. And it's nice that you guys had at least the wherewithal to be like, shit, we need to pivot, right?
Yeah.
Like it's never fun to go tell someone like, hey, this isn't working. We're going to have to pivot. But
we have to think about,
Yeah. I had one last thing that occurred to me about Tilt. Do you think that's still a viable business model, or do you think that MSOs are still going to pursue, either through their own development, more brands, or acquiring brands and putting them into these sort of companies? Do you think it's still out? There's still a potential for that?
I do think there is, because I think there's a lot of efficiency in building on an existing brand, a successful brand like Old Pal, like Black Buddha Cannabis, like Heisman. Those brands that have actual weight and, value and consumer buy-in behind them. There's a lot of value to take advantage of that brand equity that those brands have already built rather than building your own. Building out branding, packaging takes forever. And, trying to plant, yet another SKU on the market when you can say, hey, let's partner. And a lot of those relationships, and Greg, I'm sure they're white labeled, right? So it's not that, Wana has a license in every market. It's Tilt has a license. Tilt is growing, manufacturing unique strains to go into these products. And I know Tilt has publicly said, they've pivoted away from their plant touching business. And so, or are currently pivoting away from their plant touching business. But I know, the cannabis has leaned into that a couple of years ago. And I know they picked up a few of the brands that Tilt eventually, I don't mean to say that they walked away from it, and I don't
divested.
Mean that like they divested, they split, they ended the relationship with, and I know that the cannabis is now carrying a lot of those brands, and I think because of the efficiency that comes with that and the ability to go to market a lot faster with a known brand, I still think there's a lot of viability in that approach.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. One of the things that really blows my mind is, all these consumers that are out there, you can see the brand power that somebody has as they move from state to state. One of the funnier things to me is consumers aren't usually aware of like, well, wait a minute. I had, I'm just going to pick something random. I had Jeter's in California and it was fucking fire. I've had it in Arizona and it sucks. I am not saying that, by the way, Jeter's.
Right.
No, I picked you at random because you're massive. But that white labeling process that you talked about, it is not a transparent part of our industry. And if you don't get those SOPs right and transferred from state to state, you are kind of fucked, no matter how good your brand is.
Yeah, you are. You have to. I think that underscores the aligning with partners who share your same values, right? It's making sure you've got customers, whether you're the operator or you're the brand, those brand values have to align. And I think that whether it's, one of these white labeling brand partnerships, Greg, or even if it's just you're a brand and you want to get your product into a dispensary, understanding the business values and making sure they align, making sure people get paid, making sure, their bud tenders aren't jerks when you walk in the door, making sure that they acknowledge people and take the time to talk to people who, look like me walking into a dispensary. And I've done this for 10 years. I have a really good handle on what I'm looking for when I'm walking in, but it can still be overwhelming sometimes. And I think, and on the opposite side, we talked a little bit the other day, Greg, about, having brand values and making sure that those carry through your entire organization, because you could have a really fire brand, amazing packaging that's flying off the shelves. But if your sales guy's an asshole, if your sales guy doesn't follow up, if my orders are late or whatever, like eventually your brand values aren't lining my pockets, and I can't waste any more time on that. So
it always
they're hard decisions hard decisions to make, but making sure that your brands are aligned, I think, is a really critical point. We have to be a little, I say this, opportunistically, but we have to be a little less, I'm sorry, I say this optimistically. We have to be a little less opportunistic and a little more realistic and strategic.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think doing the little things well on the back end, to your point, goes a long way. I can put out all the art I want and everyone can be like, that's fucking cool. But if I'm not delivering, my main product, which is cannabis, to a dispensary in a timely manner at a price that makes sense, then what am I doing? Right.
Right.
I want to touch on something which I think is super cool. Talk to me about your advocacy, hashtag Canamom, all of the things that you do that are not the, total pro that I know on the business side who's killed it in different verticals in cannabis. There's another side to you that I definitely want people to know about. We talk a little bit about that for us?
Sure. So again, honestly, kind of going back to that aha moment that I had about 10 years ago. That was also about the time I got really involved with NCIA. The National Cannabis Industry Association, was involved with them for a long time. I actually now sit on their board. And the reason I tie that kind of together with the Canamom is that there's so much destigmatizing that we still need to do with this plant. And look, I am I am clearly a white suburban literal soccer mom. My daughter played soccer for 12 years. She just stopped now. She's playing flag football. Which is amazing. But I am also married to a police officer. So when you want to talk about a dichotomy and a non-traditional like face in this industry, I take that back. And what people outside of this industry don't expect someone in this industry to be, I kind of embody it. And look, if it's okay for, my friends to walk around, talk about drinking margaritas or go on wine walks, or I had half a bottle of wine on, a night to unwind. Why is it not okay to talk about plants? And, living in Colorado, I've lived in Colorado for 25 years. I live in Douglas County. Douglas County is still a dry county. I have to cross the county line to go to a dispensary, which I only say hysterically because then they get my tax dollars, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But there's no medical, there's no growing, there's no nothing in Douglas County. And so what's interesting is as soon as I make it okay to talk about it, it's okay to talk about it. There were a bunch of us moms, I don't know, I think our daughters were taking homecoming pictures and we were standing there talking about it. And one of the moms who I'd known for a long time said something to me about cannabis. And one of the other moms was like, wait, you work in cannabis? I'm like, yeah, I do. And she's like, so does my husband. And I'm like, why are we whispering? So there's small things and big things that we do, advocating for, reform at the legal level, for rescheduling, descheduling, making sure that people are aware of the hamstrings that this industry is facing, as well as just being the face down the street of someone who works in cannabis, uses cannabis, who's also married to a police officer. We can all, live together. Cannabis is not this big, bad danger that we were told it was. It's a plant. It's a God-given plant. It was put here to heal us, and it was put here for us to use. And why have we demonized it so bad? So that's, not a solid, tactical answer for you, Greg, but that's kind of the approach I take in just everywhere I go.
No, I love it. I have to ask one question. Does your husband catch any shit on the force for you being in cannabis?
No, they actually, for a long time, I was referred to as the drug czar. and it's, they get and I just kind of tell my guys I'm on the wrong side of the industry. I came into this too late. There's no drug czar money. That's not what it is.
Long gone, baby.
It's long gone. Nobody's got the drug czar money. But no, it's fun. He doesn't get a lot of shit. It's just more fun ribbing. So
that's great. That how times have changed. That's amazing.
It is. It is. Well, and it's funny because, when he was an officer when Colorado, switched, turned out, the legal market opened up, and he's like the weirdest, it was early January. He's like the weirdest stop he ever had was pulling someone over and having to give him his drugs back because he could legally have them.
I have seen these, and these are yours, and now I'm returning them to you.
I've seen these. These are within the legal limit. You can have them back.
Right. Amy, I have a couple more questions for you. Sure. You've been very generous with your time. One of the interesting things about you is that you have been able to walk into many different boardrooms and many different high-level executive areas, and also interact with those, like you talked about, those guys who might be the smaller guys, own a brand. And now at RX Green, you're yet again interacting kind of with almost back in the dirt again, right? And I guess, is there any through line that you see about who is going to be successful as a leader in this business, and who you look at and you're just like, oh God, that kind of, what is that through line for you?
Yeah, for me, and I've had the benefit of working with a lot of really good bosses and leaders over, the years of my career. I've had a handful of ones who who we won't talk about, but I think what I see, whether you're a grower, whether you're a leader, I look for authenticity, I look for transparency, and I look for accountability. As a leader myself, if something goes wrong on my team, if my team makes a mistake, if something goes, unless they're, committing a crime or somebody dies, if a mistake is made, that's on me, right? I own that because that's my team, that's my responsibility. I expect that type of accountability from people that I work for. I expect that from people that I work with. And I think people who have that kind of authentic, transparent, but also very kind of driven, like, this is what we're aiming for. This is what we're trying to get to. And taking almost, I don't want to say a non-emotional perspective on it, because everything is emotional. And I think we have to be passionate about this plant to be successful in this industry. But I think taking a very true operational, realistic focus and applying that to, and just kind of melding that together. You can be passionate, but you also have to be realistic. Yeah, passionate and pragmatic at the same time, but leading with authenticity, leading with transparency, leading with accountability. And I think that is what I look for. I mean, Gary, probably like you, I've been sold we're going to have an exit and you're going to get rich. And at all of the places I've worked for, it's never happened. So, I'm not counting on a windfall anywhere in cannabis, but we do it for the love of the plant. And quite honestly, for me, even more than that, it's the people. It's the people in this industry, and people who you can count on. And I think there are a lot of people you can count on. There's a lot of people you can't, but you just have to surround yourselves with the people who you can. And I always say we have to continue to lift up the good people.
Yeah.
And surround ourselves with them.
Oh, that is very well said.
Because ultimately the bad ones are going to, whether they know it or not, are going to start to get exited. And you and I talked about that the other day too. It's, there's an unwritten blacklist out there.
Oh yeah. And once you're on it in cannabis, especially, word gets around. We all talk.
Yeah.
I was talking to someone just the other day about somebody I did not enjoy doing business with. My last one for you, yes, Amy, is one of my favorite questions. Given how much experience you've had in cannabis and experiences, what's that one thing that you kind of wish you had known earlier? And it doesn't necessarily have to be a negative or a positive about our industry. You've been so high level. Like what stands out to you? You're like, shit, I wish I would have known that.
I wish I would have known it was going to be this hard, this long. And I say that, coming from a very blessed position in this industry, and I acknowledge that, but I think, I say this encouragingly. If you are not afraid of hard work, if you're not afraid of wearing 14 hats, if you're not, if you are very passionate about the plant and what you're trying to do and willing to work hard, this is the place to be. If you're looking to come in and make a quick buck, or, get out, or, have a quick exit, this is not where you need to be. I mean, I joke, Greg, I started in marketing, at RX Green. I started in marketing. I took over the sales team. I now know more about supply chain and production capacity and inventory management and all of the things than I ever thought I would ever have to do when I got my degree in journalism 100 years ago. And knowing that, the stressors and the challenges and the new positions that were put in, they're all just feeding us for whatever our next step is. And everything I've learned, as much as there are days that I want to pull my hair out, it's all building to something. And I think we just all have to, and I don't know if that really answers your question, Greg, but I think had I known it was going to be this hard 10 years ago, I might have rethought it, but I'm really glad I didn't, because of the relationships I've made, the experience that I've had, and quite frankly, if I've done any bit of good helping to destigmatize this plant and help to move things forward, then it was worth it.
Well, I have no doubt that you definitely have. Your reputation as a professional is well known throughout the industry, and I think honestly the key thing to your point of everything that you said is I am so clear with people about, hey, should I get into this space? And I'm like, sit down and let's really discuss that.
Yeah.
Because there is a world where you can, like, my favorite thing you've ever said is, if you're going to go out and hire someone who's leaving cannabis, and I held no ill will towards people who leave cannabis at this point, it's brutal. You're getting an all-star. You're getting someone who's worn 14 hats. They've been punched in the face 100 times. And I love your sentiment there that, like, it's really fucking hard, but you're glad you did it.
No, I am. And just to, I know we're kind of trying the knock here, but, I have, especially in marketing in cannabis right now is really hard. Senior level marketing positions are very few and far between at this point in the industry. And every time I talk to, another friend, another colleague who is looking to get out or who, wasn't really given the choice, but they lost their position and they're interviewing outside of the industry, and you can't hardly get past the gatekeepers because they see cannabis and they think, and they blow it off and they think, oh, you're a stoner or you were just having fun, you were wasting time, when really, Greg, back to our earlier comments, all the success that we've had as marketers in this space has been done with both hands tied behind our back, and honestly somebody hitting us over the head half the time we're walking down the street. So any success you've had has been done despite those restrictions, without access to all of the other tools that traditional marketers have in traditional industries. So my success should mean a lot more to you, not less.
I think that is where we're going to leave it, Amy Larson. You are the best. I so appreciate your time. The time flew by. And thank you again for appearing on the podcast. And I look forward to catching up with you on our little monthly, we won't call them bitch sessions. We'll just call them friend sessions.
Yes, friendly venting. So.
That's right. Awesome. Thank you, Amy.
Thank you. No, thank you so much, Greg. I really appreciate it. It was a blast.